Since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
In 1942, Ken Heckler entered the U.S. Army and attended Officer Candidate School. There, he and fellow tank commanders in training were assigned the straightforward task of putting to paper their life stories.
I started out with a sentence about the fact that I'd been born in 1914, shortly after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand at Sarajevo, which was the spark that set off World War I. It started, "The smoke of Sarajevo had scarcely drifted away when a squalling, brawling infant burst upon an unsuspecting world." And I got a call from the commanding general of the armored force. He said, "When I read the first sentence of your autobiography, I just couldn't put it down." I could not put it down, and I just read all about the things that you had been through in your teaching and working for Franklin Roosevelt. And he said, "You should be doing something far more important than just driving a tank in this war." I said, "No, sir, I've been trained to be a tank commander, sir." And he said, "No, it's too late. We're going to send you to the European Theater of Operations, and you're going to be a combat historian to get together material that can be useful in lessons learned for the service academies like West Point and Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth." Our major occupation was with notebooks to go around and interview all of the soldiers involved in operations and the most critical actions.
Heckler found in the taking of the bridge at Remagen, Germany, the rewards of courage, initiative, and training.
Remagen was a beautiful example of how training provided a unified group of soldiers who were able to work very closely together in a dramatic, unpredicted, unplanned operation.
World War II helped prepare young Americans for post-war public service and political office.
Had it not been for my service in World War II, I never would have entered politics. The service itself reshaped the minds and the character of many young people in America. Public service seemed to be, in some cases, almost extension of what you were doing in the service, whether you were in the Air Force, Marines, whatever branch it might be.
We were engaged in public service. We thought it was the highest endeavor. Why? Because we were up against a miserable totalitarian force in the form of the Axis powers. They were out to take over much of the world. And being in that kind of experience left one with the feeling that this was a very rewarding endeavor, the feeling that somehow we were giving ourselves, maybe giving our lives, to a cause that was larger than any one of us alone.
Germany surrendered in May 1945. To better understand German military strategy, Major Ken Heckler interviewed the surviving members of the German High Command, including Air Marshal Hermann Goering, Adolf Hitler's longtime confidant.
Goering was a very interesting character because he demonstrated his power of persuasion frequently to show where he'd gotten where he was. And sometimes you had to pinch yourself to avoid getting taken in by some of his bravado.
Sentenced to death for crimes against humanity, Goering committed suicide rather than submit to public hanging. After the war, Ken Heckler returned to the U.S. Bureau of the Budget. He taught at Princeton University and helped publish Judge Samuel Rosenman's final volume of Franklin Roosevelt's presidential addresses.
I consider it of the highest importance.
In 1949, Ken Heckler impressed President Harry Truman with a detailed study of the historical role of government in assisting private business. Shortly thereafter, Heckler joined the White House staff as research director and special assistant to the president. In 1950, Heckler reviewed President Abraham Lincoln's decision to dismiss Civil War General George McClellan for insubordination. The study supported Truman's decision to relieve popular World War II General Douglas MacArthur of his command during the Korean War. Public frustration over the war, coupled with outrage over Truman's handling of a steelworkers' strike, produced the lowest presidential approval ratings to date. Truman's steadfast convictions amid public pressure impressed Special Assistant Heckler.
President Truman had two signs on his desk. Everybody knows about the buck stops here, but he also had a second sign, which was a quotation from Mark Twain. Always do right. This will gratify some of the people and astonish the rest. And he demonstrated to me and instilled in me this burning sense of justice, that you do what's right and then let the chips fall where they may.
I can take care of myself. I believe that the American people know me well enough from my service as captain of Battery D in World War I to my service as President of the United States to know that I've always acted with the best interests of my country at heart.
Truman's place in history improved with time. As president, he brought about expansion of Social Security coverage and an increase in the minimum wage. Truman desegregated U.S. armed forces while working to rebuild Europe and promoting world peace. He also worked to improve education, establish national health care, and protect civil rights. Crossing the nation by train, President Truman engaged Americans and made friends one whistle stop at a time. Ken Heckler read local newspapers and contacted librarians and public officials to provide the president with insightful details for off-the-cuff remarks.
He said, call taxi cab drivers, beauty shop operators, people that can give you an idea what people are talking about.
I think both Ken and President Truman believed that the backbone of a republic is its middle class. And the more you do to expand the middle class, the stronger and better society you will have.
A 1948 whistle stop in Oregon exemplified President Truman's ability to portray himself as a willing servant of the people.
And he looked out over the crowd and said, I know why you're here. You're not here to see Harry Truman. You're here to see the President of the United States and see how he's doing his job. And he quoted Woodrow Wilson, who once said, many men come to Washington and they grow in their jobs, but too many men come to Washington and they just swell up. And so he takes his hat, takes a look at it and says, my hat size hasn't increased an eighth of an inch since I became president.
It was liberating for Truman to get out of the White House, which he used to call the Great White Jail. It enabled him to be much more relaxed. One of my jobs on whistle stops, incidentally, was to get out among a crowd and to listen to what they were saying, and if they were unusually quiet and didn't respond, why every now and then I would say, give him hell, Harry!